So I've recently done a couple videos on performance management and being set up to fail, those types of things. And I'm going to link them here. One of them sparked some conversation with a viewer. And I absolutely love hearing your stories and having a conversation with you. So please keep letting me know your stories in the comments and I will respond. But one story stuck out to me, and it was about a person who had been put on a PIP out of the blue. And just to recap, because I've gotten some feedback here, is a PIP is a performance improvement plan. And I'll go over that in just a second, but I want to catch everybody up in case you missed it on the video about what I said about this viewer's experience. So check it out. I'm reading this one comment. This person is telling me about suddenly being pulled into a meeting and being put on a PIP. She's barely been at the company a month, and suddenly her boss is pulling her in and ambushing her with this PIP. Here's the kicker. Her boss hasn't written the PIP yet. She comes totally unprepared and basically tells the employee, you're not meeting expectations and I'm going to be putting you on a PIP. And here's what actually makes my mind want to explode. She wants the employee's help in writing the PIP. I cannot tell you what a pathetic example of leadership. I shouldn't even use the word leadership. This person is leader in name only. I have no words. Okay, what did you think? Mind blown? Mine is still blown that this came out of the blue for this viewer. And I do have some updates. So first of all, she clarified it wasn't month 2, I think what I said in the video or whatever it was. She's actually been in the role for about 10.5 months. So she's coming up on her year anniversary. Until she told me that she was actually working for the government, don't get me started on that. I was surprised to learn that there was such a long probationary period. But knowing the government, that's pretty much standard operating procedure to have at least a year worth of probation. But here's what happened. So she sat down with, as you saw in that video, she sat down with her boss, got ambushed with this PIP. But let's rewind a minute. She brought me up to speed on what happened before, because at the 6-month mark, she sat down with her boss and talked about goals and all the things, and it went really well. 4.5 months later, suddenly she's a poor performer. And here's the other kicker. She's actually a supervisor, so she's in middle management. She's in middle management. So the fact that her leader is treating her this way does not set a good example for her as a leader to effectively performance manage her employees. That alone is just baffling. And she went on to say how she is a people-first leader, which I absolutely believe. And so she is left with, okay, I'm being treated a certain way, but I'm not going to treat my team the same way. So it's just really confusing. So what did she do? She went to HR, which I love, because as you saw in that video, HR was nowhere to be found. They weren't engaged in the PIP development or anything else. And let's remember what blew my mind. Her boss wanted her to write the PIP. I still don't even know where to begin with that. So she goes and talks to HR, sits down, explains the situation, is really trying to seek to understand. And what I really appreciated about it is she approached it in a calm and professional manner, because I've been on the receiving end of these employees where they come in, they're outraged, and you have to deal with all the drama and kind of wade through it to figure out what the situation is. So bravo, you approached HR in a professional, calm manner, and that set you up for, well, it should have set you up for a good conversation. But the HR, I don't know. HR said, I can't even get it out because it's so absurd. The PIP was meant to be seen as a positive. Let's recap. I'm sorry. I just got to recap. A PIP is kind of the kiss of death, right? This is the last step in a performance management process before you get terminated for poor performance. So for the HR person to sit there and tell this employee to her face that no, you've got it all wrong. We see your performance as excellent. That's a direct quote, excellent. So we meant this performance improvement plan to be seen as a positive. The viewer, the employee, called it a clown world, which I absolutely think is generous at this point. I mean, no disrespect to the clown community. This is bizarro world. I think she stepped into an alternate dimension. I have no words. So what has happened since? Let's kind of jump into it. But first, I've gotten a little feedback on videos where they're like, Rob, I kept saying PIP and using the acronym and everything, like, Rob, I don't know what a PIP is. So let's just take 2 seconds to review what a PIP is and what the intent is, and then we'll jump back into the story. All right, so a PIP, otherwise known as a performance improvement plan, is designed, in theory, to take a poor performing employee and give them a roadmap to get back to positive performance and even to a point of excellence. Now, it should contain what's called SMART goals, and those are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? Those are all critical components of a PIP, because oftentimes we will see poor managers load up a PIP with stuff that's not even achievable, because most PIPs are 30, 60, 90 days, mostly 60 or 90 days would be my recommendation. You have to make those goals achievable within that time frame. So while they're teed up as a supportive tool, and I'm just going to keep it real here, like I said before, it's usually the kiss of death, and it's the last step in, gathering documentation to support a termination from the organization. So, if you find yourself put on a PIP, and again, this HR group is teeing it up as, no, you have excellent performance. I'm still struggling with that. So if you find yourself on a PIP, you should be digging in, right, and saying, okay, I'm going to actually get out of this PIP and really put all my energy into positive performance. But let's be real. If we're keeping it real on this channel, you should also be, thinking about a plan B. What is your exit strategy? Because if you can control that in this time frame that you're sitting on this PIP, you should control your performance and also a job search. And I like to look at it this way. A PIP it can be looked at as a last chance, but also it's a warning shot. And if you're not listening to that warning shot or paying attention to it, you could find yourself on another conversation with your boss and your HR person where they're saying, hey, this is the end of the road for you, and we're going to be separating your employment. So here's some red flags from her story. And again, I'm going to keep it up here so you can kind of look at it. But first of all, there's no documentation. It wasn't even letters of warning or warning conversations that her performance was seen, at least by the manager, as poor or declining. So there was nothing. It just came out of the blue. Again, another red flag, like I just said before, she's asked to co-author her own PIP or write it 100% herself. I think, okay, let me just break that down for a second. Do I think there's a scenario where you could partner with your manager on writing the PIP? Sure, from a clarity standpoint, from a measurable, time-bound, relevant standpoint, all of that. Absolutely. But I think the PIP document should start with your manager, and then you have a collaboration on it. If you're not just totally shutting down and looking for another job, you have a collaboration with them on it so that you are fully aware of what the expectations are and can work to achieve them. But at the end of the day, if you're just given a blank PIP document and say, write your own PIP and I'll sign off on it, then that's just, again, another sign of poor leadership. And then the fact that HR was totally absent from the equation, I don't know what the HR scope is in this governmental department that's probably going to get disbanded, I think is the word I'm looking for, here soon, the way the layoffs are going off in the government. But maybe this HR department is spread pretty thin and couldn't be part of the PIP conversation. But I would expect that they would have processes and procedures in place to support the manager in writing that PIP. The way I understand it, management didn't even go to HR for any assistance. Otherwise, maybe they would have come prepared with a document. And then the viewer also let me know that she's in two protected classes. Obviously, she's a female and she is over the age of 40. Now, here's the thing with that. Just because you're in a protected class doesn't mean you're automatically being discriminated against. So I'm just keeping it real. I'm not saying this is fair, but the burden of proof is going to be on you, the employee, to prove via documentation or whatever it is, that you are being treated differently because of those characteristics. So my challenge back to her for consideration was, hey, I hear you, you're in two protected classes, but are you being treated differently than similarly situated employees who are, say, under the age of 40 and or male? Are you being treated differently from those groups? If the answer is yes, then you may have cause to go to take this further, whether it be internally to HR or to, externally via an employment attorney or the EEOC. So you have to think about it that way. I've seen so many people where they're like, I've been discriminated against. They come to that conclusion, and then they go to the EEOC and fill out a discrimination charge, and they check every box on the page. You've got to have a narrative behind it to say, yes, I was discriminated against because of X characteristic or demographic or whatever the case may be. You can't just check every box that applies. So really think about it that way. Are you being treated differently because of these demographics? So again, I am going to applaud my new friend in the comments on how she handled this. Grace and dignity. She didn't lash out. She remained calm. She told HR that I'm not going to participate in writing my own PIP. The manager has to do their job. The other thing she did was she didn't just sit back and take it, right? Take it lying down. She asked direct questions, sought clarity of both the HR person, but also her direct boss. That is key here. If you want to you have to engage in the process, right? So asking those questions to understand where they're coming from, especially of a boss like this who is wildly unprepared, asking those questions is just going to make them show that they're wildly unprepared even more. And then she, begin documenting everything is, she's going to start her own paper trail, not only to support her performance, but to support the way in which this overall situation was handled. That both of those documentation, if she does choose to go to the EEOC or finds herself talking to an employment attorney, that documentation is going to be critical to support her case and for her narrative to say, hey, I was treated differently because of, I'm over the age of 40 and I am a female. That documentation is going to be critical to support it, but also to determine her credibility. Because again, don't shoot the messenger. Your credibility is going to come into question, right? And in this situation, so the better you can show up as, yes, I am credible. Yes, I am. Everything is fact-based is going to set you up for success in these conversations with, again, attorneys or the EEOC or whatever. And just so I'm not getting called out in the comments, the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission with the government, and they oversee, any types of harassment, any types of employment situations, discrimination, retaliation, those types of things. And then again, bravo. She's like, look, this is a clown world. Her words, not mine. I would be not as generous. And I'm going to do my best here, but I'm going to also actively start a job search. And I think that also helps with a mindset, right? Because you're taking yourself out of that victim mindset and really focusing on, or she's focusing on, what can I control in this situation? I can control how I respond. I can control what I do with respect to any details that are brought to her attention for poor performance. Again, it doesn't sound like there are any at this point. And then, how she conducts a job search is something else she can control. So it really puts you in a better headspace if you focus on what you can control. All right. I'm going to put HR on blast here. It needs to be said, but the audacity to sit there and tell an employee to their face that you're excellent at your job. Look at the PIP as a positive thing. It's not just a pack of lies. Lies have been told. Let's just call it what it is. That is not the truth. A PIP is not meant to be positive. Is it supposed to be supportive? Yes, but we all are realists. We know that is the kiss of death. This is the last step in a performance management process. And frankly, in this step, based on what we know, they've just gone straight to Final Jeopardy. And they've skipped all the other steps in the middle, which I find, maybe with the backdrop of what's going on in the government right now, that this makes actually sense. They were told, you've got to performance manage your people out. We're not hearing that in the news per se, but maybe that's what's going on behind the scenes. So maybe that does make sense, even though it's a horrible way to treat people. And here's the thing. she followed up with me in the comments again. We've had this nice conversation, and I hope to have continued conversations with you if you're watching. But she followed me, and she's like, spoiler alert, it's been over a week, and I've still not gotten a PIP. So she's went to HR. They told her she was excellent, and then circled back with her manager, and now still no PIP. So now it's way up in the air, which actually is a total mind F, right? You're sitting there, and you're like, they told me this. They told me I was a poor performer. They told me there was going to be a PIP. There's still no PIP. Time to pack your bags. That's kind of where my mind was going. But I appreciate that you can't do that. You can't do that without a plan, right? Because that would be a knee-jerk reaction and probably a decision you would live to regret. So again, like I said a few seconds ago, focus on what you can control. You can control how you respond, and you can control your job search. And then lastly, again, with HR, they have no answers. They're just such a passive entity in this equation. That's abysmal performance in my word. I know I keep using that, but that's the best word I can come up with. So this is why HR gets such a bad rap. Like, oh, you're just on management side. You're never there for the employee. This is a perfect example of that. Again, that HR person should have been supporting the business with advice and coaching and partnership in creating that PIP. And now they should be not lying to the employee's face. They should actually be trying to support that employee in this situation. And none of that's taking place. They're just sit there sipping their coffee, right? And I'm going to take another sip right now. So here's my take, right? So this is performance management at its worst. That statement should come as no surprise to you. So if your employee is excellent and a high achiever and you don't want to lose them, don't put them on a PIP. Actually partner with them on a development plan that speaks to, hey, you know what? We're looking down the road. Where do you want to go? So I, as your leader, can partner with you and help you get there. And let's work on a development plan to address any gaps you have that could stand in your way of getting that promotion you want down the road. That's a great conversation. That's positive. That's forward thinking. That's thinking with a growth mindset. Not putting them on a PIP. That is not the way to go. And then HR failing to intervene here is not a neutral stance. It's actually enabling the poor performance of her manager. Is just broken leadership. So what advice do I have for you if you sit there and they're like, Rob, I am literally in the same situation right now. First of all, I am so sorry. But my first thing is don't panic, because panicking informs poor choices and poor decisions. So don't write your own PIP. I think what my viewer did is the exact right things to do. Ask questions for clarity from both your boss and from the HR person. Go to the HR person, even if it feels performative. You are actually creating a record. You are going to that HR person, voicing your concerns about your situation, and whether they do anything about it or not is almost immaterial, because you are showing that, hey, I leveraged my internal resources to voice my concerns and still nothing was done. That documentation is going to be key. So if you do meet with that HR person, send a note of follow-up to them. Hey, thank you for your time. This is what we talked about. I appreciate your support in this matter, or however you want to write it, but that goes in your documentation file. And that leads me to the next point, is document everything. Make sure you are getting all your past performance. In the case of my viewer, if her performance is excellent and they talked about goals and everything else, make sure you have that documentation that actually points to, yeah, you were doing a good job. Everything you were told to that point was that you were on the right track. So it just kind of, again, reinforces and underlines your stance that, hey, maybe I am being treated differently because of a protected class or whatever the situation may be. And then, if you get to that point, you've got to consider filing with, the EEOC or talking to an employment attorney. Just a note on this. I will say from personal experience that filing with the EEOC is long, and it probably will result. And I filed with the EEOC for age discrimination claim. And while they were empathetic to what I was saying, they told me, firsthand, they said to me, we're only going to take up the case of a broad or a large number of people experiencing this. So they're kind of, in my words, looking for something that's more class action oriented. So when they do that investigation, 9 times out of 10, they're going to send you what's called a right to sue letter. That means that said, hey, we're not going to investigate this, but you have the right to go get your own counsel and, take this matter further from a civil perspective. So it seems deflating to get that. But then when you do find, and I would actually talk to an employment attorney in parallel with the EEOC, because they could actually help guide you through this. And, like I said, disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I am just a recovering HR person. So make sure, if anything, from a legal perspective, you are getting actual advice from a real life attorney. And then lastly, what else can you do? You can start looking right away. And frankly, you should, a healthy way to look at things now, versus, say when I started out in my career or my parents, right? You should always kind of be massaging that plan B over here, right? Thinking about, okay, I'm going to monthly just look out what the job boards are, maybe set myself up for those auto job alerts, that type of thing. You should always be considering what else is out there, because gone are the days when companies are super loyal to you. One day you're here, the next day you're gone. You should have that plan B kind of sitting here maybe on cruise control, maybe actually take an interview once a year just to keep yourself kind of current. I think being prepared is better than being caught with your pants down, so to speak. So you find yourself in the meeting with your boss or the HR person. Here are some non-emotional phrases you can use, and they're pretty standard, but it keeps things on course, right? And it holds them accountable. First one is, I'd like to understand what led to this decision, right? That would be a perfect example, even if you're blindsided, to go back to them and say, you know what, I've thought about this, boss, and I really have to help me understand how we got here, because just 6 months ago, or 4 months ago in this case, we were rocking and rolling. You told me I was an excellent performer, and that was reinforced by my HR person. So what led us here? And then, the other one is obvious. I'd like to see a copy of this PIP before we proceed with anything. Well, obviously, in this case, the leader would be caught unprepared, wildly unprepared. So I think holding them accountable to writing that PIP is definitely, it's going to make them uncomfortable, and hopefully will prompt them into action, but it's definitely a valid question. And then, this could be threatening, right? And I saw somebody else tee this up. This is a different example, but somebody said they were being held accountable, and they're like, if you don't do this, boss, I'm going to go to HR. I don't love the threatening approach with that. And I don't like tipping my hand that I'm going to go talk to HR. You don't need to tell your boss you're going to go talk to HR. Just go do it. You say, I've reached out to HR for clarity and support in this matter, right? That signals to them that, like, oh, maybe I did handle this the wrong way. Even if you're not committed to it, say something like, I am committed to improving my performance, but I need that transparency from you, and I need that support from you. I talked about another person that I actually spoke to on the phone who was delivered a PIP and was told in that meeting, hey, if you better ask any questions you have right now, because as we move forward, I'm not going to be available to support you. I still don't know what to do with that. That leader should be fired based on that statement alone. Make sure you're asking those clarifying questions, asking them for transparency and what they're thinking, because you want to make sure you know what good looks like at the end of the day if you're going to actually amp up your performance to lean into and achieve what is outlined on that performance improvement plan. The other thing too, this is a great question, right? And it gives a nod to, am I being treated differently? Is, hey, I'm curious, HR. I'm curious, my boss. How is this process normally handled for others in my role? And I think the in my role part is really critical here, because performance management is handled differently if you're, say, an hourly frontline employee, or if you're an executive, or if you're somewhere in the middle. So I think having clarity on how that's handled, so you can, at your level, so you can ensure that you're being treated consistently, that they are being consistent in how they manage performance, is a very good question, and should give you some intel on if they're being consistent enough. And then it's something else you should document. So if you're talking to a lawyer, you can say, hey, here's the process. And they might also have it written down in, say, an employee handbook. But if you're talking to an attorney, here's the process, and here's where they're deviating from that in my situation. In wrap up for this, if you are navigating a PIP right now, and I suspect many of you are out there, you are not alone. This story that we've heard today from, my viewer, and again, hi out there, it's so frustrating, but it's not uncommon. The more that I engage with people, and after starting this channel, the more I hear stories, the more I see and hear about absolutely horrible managers. And many of those managers are not developed. They're promoted and then say, best of luck. There's no training. There's no leadership training, all of that stuff. So they are flying without a net. And I think this is a direct result of that type of lack of development. But at the end of the day, you deserve the clarity, the fairness, and this plan should be about growth. It's not about entrapment. And even though that's usually where it lands, it should be about growth. So if that's not being offered, it is absolutely time for you to go out and protect yourself. And it's all the stuff we've been talking about, whether it's seeking counsel or, talking to HR, any type of stuff like that. You need to focus on protecting yourself. So again, my name's Rob. And one thing I will say, I forgot to say at the beginning of the video, I'll have to say it again, another one. Thank you for your engagement on my channel. If you didn't see my post, I recently hit 1,000 subscribers and got over that 4,000 watch hour threshold. So that was a huge milestone for me. And I'm wildly, wildly thankful for all the engagement, people that are actually commenting and very few trolls, but I really, really appreciate you. And please bring it on. Give me some more questions. Tell me your stories. I really appreciate it. But if you are new to this channel and you are enjoying this type of content, please, I would be absolutely honored if you would like this video and subscribe for more. It is a passion project for me. It's something I've been working on, and I'm actually super enjoying my time here with you. So until next time, again, my name's Rob, and until next time, I hope you're well, and take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.